Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, your host for this evening edition on Saturday, September 18th, 2021. And if always you like additional weather information, you can go to weather.gov/Alaska. We have a fair number of things going on here. We haven't officially yet reached astronomical fall, and we're already speaking about some winter type weather. Cold front moving its way right now across the northwest will be pushing further into the interior. And this is bringing winter weather advisories this Saturday evening into the day on Sunday for the south side of the Brooks Range, particularly the upper AKwx, Chandalar River basins, including the Delton Highway and Anaktuvik passes, where 2 to as much as 5 inches of snow could fall. Areas around, say, Bettles might get a couple inches, Arctic Village an inch or so. It's definitely those higher elevations there as you go up through the south slopes of the Brooks Range. Also for south central areas, including places surrounding Cook Inlet, widespread freezing temperatures are expected tonight into early Sunday morning. So if you have a garden that's still hanging on, you want to protect things, you want to cover them up or harvest those plants. And then we're watching an area of low pressure that's currently south of the eastern Aleutians. It's going to be passing south of the Alaska Peninsula and then into the western and north central Gulf early next week. That's going to spread more rains up along the north central coast into the Panhandle. In fact, parts of the Panhandle could pick up another inch or 2 of rain here on Monday, with locally higher amounts in some of the coastal mountains. Also along the Richardson Highway, including Thompson Pass and in the Copper River Basin, there could be some accumulating snows. It's looking more likely for Sunday night into Monday. Otherwise, looking farther ahead here toward the last week of the month, we're looking at cool and dry conditions centered over the southwest portion of the state, September 24th through the 28th, and I'll show you that toward the end of this particular broadcast. But here is where the winter weather advisories are in effect. And again, it's along the south slopes of the Brooks Range from Bettles on up toward Arctic Village. Some areas, the higher elevations there toward Anaktuvik Pass could pick up 4 or 5 inches of snow tonight and into the first half of Sunday. So keep that in mind if you're going to be traveling, especially along the Dalton Highway. So here's the satellite imagery. We continue to see some cloudiness. A few showers linger there in the southern parts of the Panhandle, though Juneau has seen some sunshine today, and there's been a fair amount of sunshine Anchorage westward toward Dillingham. A weak ridge of high pressure is responsible for that. That's going to bring the clear skies and more widespread frost and freezing temperatures across south central tonight into early Sunday morning. Otherwise, notice the bright enhanced clouds there pushing through south of the Alaska Peninsula and then back toward the central Aleutians. There's an area of low pressure that's going to be slowly moving off toward the east-northeast and eventually up into the Gulf as we go into early next week. But otherwise, more important feature is the cold front that's working its way into the northwest, and it'll push across into the central interior toward butting up against the Alaska Range by the time we get into Sunday later afternoon. So here is the weather map showing that cold front now pushing into the northwest coast, and ahead of it there are areas of snow or mixed rain and snow. And those will be increasing overnight, especially along the Brooks Range, especially the south slopes. Weak ridge of high pressure will push eastward, and that'll bring clear skies across south central areas tonight and frost and freezing temperatures. Low pressure currently located south of the eastern Aleutians will continue to track eastward before turning more northeasterly and developing into the western and northern Gulf later Sunday and especially on Monday. We still have, though, overnight, weak ridge of high pressure pushing toward the southeast interior, with a cold front approaching from the northwest, and that low working its way south of the Alaska Peninsula by Sunday afternoon with an occluded front ahead of it, and that occluded front will be lifting northeastward up toward the Panhandle by Monday. You can see the cold front butting up against the Alaska Range, and that is going to have a tendency to begin to break down Still, though, the energy with that colder air is going to link up with that low that's lifting northeastward up through the western and northern Gulf by the time we get into Monday. So that's going to allow precipitation to move back into some south central areas, including the mountain areas, the Copper River Basin. We'll likely see some accumulating snow as we get into Sunday night and into Monday morning. Otherwise, on the backside of the system, back through the interior, any precipitation that remains will be in the form of some scattered light snow showers or mixed showers here as we go through Monday, with low pressure out over the Gulf and the heaviest rain occurring across portions of the Panhandle, where some areas will pick up another inch or two of rain, perhaps even locally higher amounts in some of the coastal mountains there of the Panhandle, with a tendency of weak high pressure and things trying to clear out a little bit there, maybe along the southwest coast with more of a northerly, cool northerly flow. So Sunday morning, look for lows generally mid-40s across the Panhandle. However, the interior, south central areas could see some lows into the upper 20s with frost and freezing temperatures. High Sunday afternoon with sunshine, generally mid-50s there around Anchorage, Talkeetna, Glen Allen, including Whittier down toward Seward. And then generally in the 50s there across the Panhandle. And then low temperatures Monday morning, mid-40s to near 50 degrees in the Panhandle. Colder back up toward McGrath. If there's any clearing, you could see temperatures below freezing, upper 20s there. Otherwise, under the cloud cover, lows generally around 40 south central areas, and high temperatures on Monday afternoon area-wide will generally be cooler, with perhaps the exception down there in the southern part of the Panhandle getting up near 60. Everybody else generally lower 50s or so for highs Monday afternoon. And across the Arctic coast, lows will be upper 20s, 20s along the Brooks Range with areas of snow falling. And generally, where it's any clearing toward the Alaska range will be down around 20. And then high temperatures generally in the 30s, mid-30s there north of the Yukon River, 40s south of the Yukon River, still 50-degree reading possible Fairbanks on over toward Northway. Lows generally getting well down into the teens across the Brooks Range and north of the Yukon River, 20s and 30s elsewhere, and then looking for high temperatures only in the 30s north of the Yukon River, and generally in the upper 30s to lower 40s along the Yukon Valley. Across the southwest, we're looking for lows. Some areas could get down into the upper 20s toward the mountains there, the west arm of the Alaska Range. Otherwise, still around 40 along the west coast. And as we go along the Aleutian chain, we're looking at lows mid-40s. And then temperatures Sunday afternoon back up into the lower to mid-50s across areas like Dillingham on over toward King Salmon. And then for Monday morning lows, if there's any clearing on the backside of that low, could get down below freezing up there through the lower middle, certainly Yukon and Kuskokwim River basins. And then high temperatures Monday afternoon area-wide, generally confined lower to mid-40s, though some 50s showing up as you trail down the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian chain. So the climate outlook, our temperature outlook for September 24th through the 28th, just prior to the end of the month, look for below normal temperatures, especially centered on the southwest portion of the state. So we're going to continue to see cooler than normal temperatures for this time of year. However, it's looking drier, especially across the southwest, extending up toward the central south slopes there of the Brooks Range, which would at least be welcome. A little drier weather, whereas precipitation could average a bit above normal across the southeast Panhandle as we go through the end of the month.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, moving along now to your flight weather here, as if you're heading out Sunday into Monday, we do have a blast of some wintry weather across portions of the northern half of the state associated with a cold front that will be pressing further south and east across the central and northeast interiors, butting up to the Alaska Range Sunday afternoon. This front will have with it a band of rain and snow showers mixed changing to snow, with winter weather advisories, potential for accumulating snows this Saturday evening through midday Sunday, especially around places like Bettles, Arctic Village could see 2 to as much as 5 inches of snow in some of the higher elevations. Off further south, the low pressure south of the Alaska Peninsula will also be working its way east-northeastward into the Gulf, developing that way as we go through the next couple of days. So look for IFR conditions along that cold front, pushing its way in through the central Yukon Valley up into the eastern Brooks Range, northeast Arctic coast. Meanwhile, IFR conditions will expand across the Gulf, and also IFR conditions off the southwest coast, Nunavik Island, back toward the central Bering, For Monday morning, look for areas of IFR up there in the north, along the northeast coast, east part of the Brooks Range, back toward the west end of the Brooks Range, northwest Arctic coast, as well as along central western parts of the Alaska Range, areas of the Gulf, southern half of the Panhandle, and then back out toward the western Aleutians. And by Monday afternoon, still some IFR conditions anticipated from around Yakutat down through the southeast there through the Panhandle, and then also back up along the northwest Arctic coast, and generally just north and west of the central Aleutians through the central Bering. Past conditions Sunday, and a typical see IFR conditions become MVFR as that cold front passes further south and east. Same thing at Adigan, IFR becoming MVFR. Be ready there for some winter precipitation. Lake Clark and Merrill should be able to hold on to VFR conditions throughout the day on Sunday as that cold front approaches and moves toward the north side of the Alaska Range. Same thing at Rainy Pass. Look for VFR conditions holding Sunday, as well as Windy Pass. And then further east, Isabel and Mentasta will hang on to VFR conditions on Sunday. And as we drop further south and west, Tanita as well as Portage should enjoy VFR conditions. Further east there on the north end of the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White will start out with VFR conditions on Sunday, becoming MVFR as the day unfolds. And looking at freezing levels are down near the surface across much of the interior for Sunday morning, where skies are clear, generally 2,000 feet or less, northern third of the state, rising back up to 4,000 feet across south central areas and the southwest interior, and then briefly back up around or above 6,000 feet in the Alaska Peninsula and toward the south end of the Panhandle. Icing greatest threat will be along that cold front pressing inland across the central interior between 3,000 and 10,000 feet there, especially north of the Yukon River, and then also south of the Alaska Peninsula between 6,000 and 13,000 feet, that area of low pressure there. And there could be some isolated icing between 7,000 and 14,000 feet there across the southeast, and some areas of cloudiness and lighter precipitation. Upper level jet stream winds are strongest there. Haida Gwaii, northwesterly winds 125 knots. Back to the northwest, a trough moving in ahead of it. Southwest winds 70 to 85 knots across much of the northern half of the state, turning around to the northwest across eastern Russia as high as 70 to 90 knots, and then dropping down. You see that trough pressing inland across the northwest interior with winds of 35 to 40 knots at 9,000 feet. Low pressure circulation there just south of the Alaska Peninsula, with winds on the backside out of the northeast 35 to 45 knots. Ahead of it, we have an area of winds out over the lower Gulf and North Pacific, 45 to 65 knots from the southwest. And then down to 3,000 feet, you still have that low pressure circulation south of the Alaska Peninsula, with winds, counterclockwise winds going from southeast turning to northeast 35 to 45 knots, and northwesterly winds over the lower Chukchi Sea out of the northwest there at 40 knots. Best chance for any turbulence will be down there along the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, surface to 4,000 feet, and then also associated with that a cold front along and behind the front to their surface to 5,000 foot, and also surface to 3,000 feet there along the northwest coast. So that does it for your flight weather. If you are thinking about heading out, check the latest conditions and forecast, and certainly have a safe flight.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen, and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. but threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. And the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and as we conclude today's show with the marine weather, we start with the sea ice edge. We're almost to that point, maybe about a week away or so to minimum ice. And after that point, we'll start to see the ice slowly rebuilding southward. But in the meantime, plenty of open water there along the Arctic north and northwest coast. And we don't foresee any significant changes here coming up here through the end of the month. Otherwise, across the southeast panhandle, we are looking for winds, the inner waterways, variable 5 to 10 knots, turning a little more southeast to south through Petersburg up through Juneau and Skagway, waves a couple of feet. And along the outer coast there, winds will be out of the south, generally at 10 to 15 knots, turning more toward the southeast and then east there west of Yakutat with waves in the 6 to maybe as high as 8 foot range off of Craig. But on Monday, we're going to have a frontal system approaching as the low pressure moves into the north central Gulf, and that means gale force winds to 40 knots out of the southeast to east along coastal areas with waves building 12 to 17 feet. Inner waterways, look for south winds increasing as high as 30 knots. Mouth of Dixon entrance with waves of 6 feet, only though about 15 to 20 knots through Lynn Canal with waves of 3 feet. And across south central areas Sunday, we're looking across the northern Gulf, winds out of the east at 20 knots, waves generally 5-6 feet. Winds out of the northeast down along Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet, 10 to as high as 15 knots, waves a couple of feet there. In Prince William Sound, maybe 4 or 5 feet toward the mouth of Cook Inlet once you get southwest of Homer. And then on the backside of that low, winds are going to be turning more northerly on Monday, and we'll see winds upwards to 30 knots off the Kenai, 40-knot gales there at the mouth of Cook Inlet to northeast of Kodiak Island with waves of 10 to 15 feet. And Prince William Sound, as well as toward Anchorage, winds out of the north 25 to 30 knots, waves 6 feet in Prince William Sound, maybe 6 to 8 feet there in the upper end of Cook Inlet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, look for winds out of the east-northeast. That'll be increasing 25 to 30 knots on the Pacific and on the Gulf side, with waves building 9 to as high as 14 feet south of Sand Point and 4 to 8 feet on the Bering side. And then on Monday, as that low is well east of the area, winds are going to turn more north and northwesterly. Look for northwest winds of 30 to 40 knots there along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Waves generally in the 9 to 12 foot range. And then Bristol Bay southward, 30 knot north winds and waves 6 to 8 feet. Across the Aleutians, winds will be out of the north on Sunday, 30 knots with waves anywhere from about 13 to 16 feet. The eastern Aleutians, 10 to 12 feet on the Bering side. And as you get west of AKwx, winds will be more out of the west-northwest, 15 to 20 knots, waves 6 to 9 feet. And then on Monday, we will see winds out of the northeast across the eastern Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots as a general rule, waves 6 to 8 feet, and then winds will be turning back more toward the southeast, 25 upwards to 30 knots, especially west of Kiska, as the next weather system approaches the far western Aleutians. And then for the west coast, look for winds generally out of a north-northwest direction, 15 to 25 knots there, especially west of St. Paul, St. George, waves 5 to 7 feet. North winds to 20 knots, 4-footers there in Norton Sound. And then on Monday, winds will generally turn a little bit more to the northwest along the upper coast there, north of Nunavik Island at 15 to 20 knots, waves around 4 feet. And winds still out of the north there off of the southwest coast there at 30 knots and 7-footers. The Arctic coast on Sunday will see winds south-southwest 20 to as high as 30 knots, Utqiagvik, and waves will be 4 to 5 feet, though a little higher, Utqiagvik southwestward along the coast there, 6 to 7 feet in the Chukchi Sea with winds of 25 to 30 knots from the northwest. And then on Monday, we're looking for winds around 30 knots along the Arctic coast, waves 8 feet, at 25 to 30 knots, the lower Chukchi Sea extending down to Kotzebue Sound and near north of the Bering Strait with waves generally running around 8 feet. And a quick check of the weather map. We're going to have a cold front continue to press inland toward the interior. Behind it, that's what's going to bring those gustier northwest winds to the northwest coast, the lower Chukchi Sea. Meanwhile, low pressure will be passing south of the Alaska Peninsula, and that feature is going to ride up along the west side into the north central Gulf on Monday. And with it, it will bring those gale force winds, especially to the southeast panhandle then for the day on Monday. That does it for your show. I'll be back again tomorrow night. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.